to Road Ahead 2021, the Progressive Community's only conference dedicated to ballot measures. Thank you so much to the over 800 people who are joining us today. 490 of you have never been to Road Ahead before. Just one of the great things about being virtual. So let's start with some introductions. My 2021 name is Chris Melody Fields Figueredo. I am the executive director of the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center, and my pronouns are she, her, ella. And I come to you from the traditional lands of the Anacostan and Piscataway people who have been stewards of the land we now call Washington, D.C. for generations. And I'm so excited to be joined with my friend and co-MC for today, Prentice Haney.
Hey. Hello, everyone. My name is Prentice Haney, and my pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the co-executive director of the Ohio Organizing Collaborative, a statewide community organizing organization building power for everyday Ohioans. And I am joining you all from the traditional lands of the Hopewell and Shawnee people in Ohio. And we must remember that we all live on stolen and sacred land, and our liberation is connected to the indigenous communities who also seek sovereignty.
That's right, Prentice. We must center our indigenous communities in our work. You know, Road Ahead is one of my favorite parts about being at BIS because it's when I get to be with you in Vegas, usually, in our community that really just keeps building and dreaming with us. You are what makes Road Ahead special, and you inspire our work at BIS. If I'm being honest with everyone, I have not been the best version of myself in the last year. But what gives me hope, why I know we will build a world where equity and justice prevail, is the brilliance and resilience of this community. And Road Ahead is a celebration of that, of you. That's why we named this year Resilience and Brilliance.
Chris, I love that. You know, one of my favorite things about Road Ahead is that you all inspire audacity in the practitioners in the field. We go big because y'all dream big, so we go big. Road Ahead has provided a roadmap for how we can shift culture in our work and build durable people-centered power. The research you all have provided us in Ohio and other states back up what we already know around Black, Latinx, AAPI, and the indigenous folks and young folks, that they trust ballot measures to make the impact that can happen in our communities more than candidates. And what I love more than anything is that you fight and make sure we have a seat at the table.
That means so much, Prentice. You and our community is everything to us at BISC. Before we get started on today's programs, I do want to set some expectations. Road Ahead is different this year, and it's not just because we're virtual. We are giving you a very compact schedule. Today looks back at 2020 and unpacks our learnings on ballot measures and the resilience of our people. Tomorrow, we'll focus on our path forward and the brilliance that is required to build the world that our people deserve. You know, we have all been living in the world of Zoom for over a year now, and we know how hard it is to be on screen more than 2 to 3 hours straight. So think of today and tomorrow as an amuse-bouche, a taste to your palate to tickle it and inspire you. And we'll end each day with 20 to 30-minute breakout sessions that draw from the day's conversation so you can dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, we know being online all the time is so hard, but we have great engagement tools for this conference. So just take a minute and look at your left side of your screen here. There are engagement tools such as the agenda, profiles. There's some amazing people you should check out. And then also there's a community engagement tab where you can create discussions about today's sessions or even suggest virtual meetups. I saw someone talk about karaoke, and I'm like, wait, I got to see what people can do. What chops you got? I want to hear your best lip sync if you're actually going to do that karaoke session.
That's right.
And also the other piece is down here on the bottom lower right screen. For our differently able community, we have an ASL interpreter to make sure that you all can have the access you need.
Yeah, I really love, Prentice, how people are already engaging, like already talking about, karaoke next year in Vegas. 2020 was really hard in so many ways. It further laid bare the racial and economic inequity that exists in the systems that were not designed to the benefit of Black, Latinx, Asian Pacific Islander, Indigenous, and other marginalized people. And that did not change with the start of a new year. The insurrection on January 6th, the tragedies in the last couple of weeks in Atlanta and Boulder, They're all reminders of how deeply painful this year has already been. But I'm turning to the words of activist Grace Lee Boggs to remind me, people must not only struggle against the existing institutions in order to change and transform the world, they must change and transform themselves.
It is true. We must transform ourselves and we must do it together. We can build state power. We can dismantle white supremacy. We can build a new economy and a new democracy, and we can do it together. We find liberation, and we can use the ballot measure system as a tool to do that. And guess what? We can do it while looking good.
Yes, we can. Thank you so much, Prentice, for opening this day up with me. And I honestly cannot think of anyone who is more at the forefront of dismantling those systems of oppression that you named and understanding exactly how intertwined our liberation is to each other than today's keynote and the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Cullors. Thank you so much. Enjoy today.
Thank you, Chris, and the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center for inviting me to speak with you all today. And thank you as well for your commitment to building power at the grassroots level. Ballot measures are a central part of my theory of change. My first step into this realm was last year with Measure R and LA County. Me and a whole bunch of folks were sick and tired of watching the abuse and violence perpetuated in our jails by Sheriff Villanueva. He was filling the jails with folks who were chronically homeless, people who had issues with substance dependency, people who had mental health issues, and people who just couldn't afford bail. And he was accountable to no one. So we decided to hold him accountable. In less than 5 months, we collected nearly 250,000 signatures. That's over 100,000 more than we needed. But each signature was a chance to organize and educate our community about the issue and the power we, not some elected official, had to change. There was no waiting for politicians to act or watching special interests water down meaningful reforms, just the community coming together to demand change. We brought together a team led by Black women and made up of system-impacted folks who wanted to take policy into their own hands. And in March of 2020, we won with 73% of the vote. Our coalition of advocates transformed into Reform LA Jails, an organization in LA County that is continuing the fight. That was just the beginning. The summer uprising in response to the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, and too many others made clear that our communities wanted transformative change. When we say defund the police, we mean it. We were tired of decades of tinkering around the edges, more body cameras, banning chokeholds. None of these things worked in the past, and they weren't going to work now. We wanted and need bold reimagining of real public safety that focuses on investing in health, environmental justice, housing justice, and all the other things that really keep us secure. Once again, we saw politicians unwilling to meet the moment. So in LA, we took things in our own hands. Justice LA, BLM LA, Reform LA Jails, and other community organizations came together to create and fight for Measure J. Measure J explicitly directed up to 10% or at least $500 million of discretionary spending to local communities and alternatives to incarceration. This money used to be poured into punishment. Measure J was our way of putting defund directly on the ballot. And once again, we won. This time with 57% of the vote. The lesson here is people-powered ballot measures tap into and amplify the power we have in the streets. They are a profound way to bring the movement into the halls of power. And right now, the movement is calling for defunding the police and reimagining public safety. How can you all use your expertise to meet their needs? Is it a ballot measure cutting police budgets or prohibiting cops in schools? Is it decriminalizing or legalizing the harm and violence that leads to the majority of arrests? Is it removing the need for a police force from the municipal charter itself? Be bold, be imaginative, but above all, tap into your communities in an intentional and meaningful way. Listen to what they want and help design campaigns that will achieve those goals and create sustainability in the long term. We'll all be better for it. Thank you all so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marcia Donay. I'm the Capacity Building Director here at BISC, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm very, very excited to be starting this conference off with a wonderful conversation with wonderful colleague and friend, Becca. Becca, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, Marcia. Hey, y'all. My name is Becca Guerra. I'm the director of the New American Majority Fund at the Democracy Alliance, and I use she, her, and ella pronouns.
Awesome. Well, Becca, you and I have both been in this work for a little while now, and you've seen pretty much every angle at this point, from C3 infrastructure work to ballot measure work, and now through the lens of a funder. And 2020 certainly put all of these years of our experiences to the test. And that is why I'm very excited to be having this conversation with you this afternoon. You know, the story of ballot measures in 2020 was challenging and unique in many ways. And while these uncharted waters offered many setbacks that were also opportunities for growth and innovation and brilliance within our community, you know, there was also, you know, just a lot to be learned. And so when you think about the past year, what are some of the things that are sticking with you?
Yeah. I think when we talk about 2020, it's first really critical to set the context. This year was a historical election, but for many of our communities, this was truly a life or death situation with the potential for unfathomable outcomes if we lost. The entire year presented challenges for state leaders, and our organizations navigated it masterfully. By early March, the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic was beginning to have layered effects for grassroots organizations. First, their entire electoral program was turned on its head, forcing groups to prove to donors that they could still be impactful, despite a circumstance that none of us had ever experienced, to get resources. But it wasn't just about voter contact. It was also impacting their internal workings as organizations. Groups had to move talented canvassers into remote working environments, which many had never experienced, while adapting to new tools and technology. There was the reality that their teams, real people, were also experiencing a global pandemic. That meant taking additional time and space to care about their people. State leaders were navigating these changes while balancing the reality of ongoing progressive ecosystem obstacles, like lack of health care for canvassers, programmatic budgets that don't cover a living wage, and constant donor demands to get to the cheapest cost per card, registration, or contact. Then the summer brought a national uprising for racial equity. For many of our communities, it was a moment we'd worked towards, lifting up the inequities in our systems and in our country more broadly. It was a moment of accountability. But I also want to name that there is also deep emotional burden and trauma to that work, which grassroots organizations and leaders have been shouldering. There is real trauma in having to repeat and relive stories of Black, Indigenous, Latinx, AAPI, and other people of color and murders. And these groups have been shouting it for years, alongside accounts and experiences of systems that have torn apart our families, penalized the most marginalized, and made the basic necessities inaccessible. So while there is an appreciation for a collective awakening of our country, there's also a question of how much more before we get to real change. All of this was further compounded by the impacts of climate change, with devastating fires in the West and multiple hurricanes across the South, interrupting daily lives on top of planned program, events, internet connections needed to make remote working possible, and displacing staff and volunteers. It was state leaders who quickly assessed the needs of our people and pivoted accordingly, providing vital information and resources to their communities. Much of this work was critical, and yet much of it was also not resourced. So all of this to say, Marcia, when we look back at 2020 with our rose-colored party glasses celebrating a Biden-Harris win, it's critical that we also recount the context of what our state organizations and leaders were up against. The scenario was more than just shifts in programmatic and electoral work. To be standing at the end of 2020, it required a level of toughness, flexibility, and strategy that we saw through our state leaders. We literally saw resilience embodied.
Yeah, absolutely. And I gotta say, one of the great fortunes of my job and the role that I play at BISC is that I get to talk to these brilliant people every day. And most recently, as we've been having these conversations with them to inform the landscape analysis that BISC does, looking back at 2020, I got to have some really deep conversations with over 35 campaign leaders about these challenges and the ways they had to pull through. And I gotta say, the thing that has really jumped out at me, even, along with all of the innovative approaches and brilliance that folks took, but the thing that was feeding my own resilience over the last year that I think needs to be acknowledged is the ways that our community showed up for each other. The way that these leaders showed up for each other, for their communities, for their staff, for their volunteers. I mean, things like wellness checks or, finding ways to pay for and provide PPE or, helping people meet their most basic needs while also supporting each other through ongoing and, for many of our folks, compounding traumas. And the treatment of all of us to show up in this work as full humans, to make room to bring our full selves into each space is a culture shift, and one that needs to be protected and preserved and, moved into this next phase of our work and our lives. And as you've already laid out, state leaders were thrown every possible obstacle and they found a way forward because they had to. And our partners were consistently assessing the opportunities and the challenges and shifting to meet the moment. And since ballot measures are their own unique approach with long-term campaigns, they start early, we were able to learn from those adaptations in the spring and summer of 2020, which allowed us to help inform the civic engagement and voter programs across the progressive ecosystem in the late summer to the fall, including large-scale candidate programs. And so it's not just about the innovative tactics we're employing, but it's also grounding ourselves in the real capacity we need to execute them while centering the most impacted communities. So the challenges of 2020 demonstrated the need for that shift in the way that we campaign and think about the collective things we can do to support those shifts. So as you're thinking about the future ballot measure work, what are those shifts that you're hoping will continue?
Again, when we tell the story of 2020, we're going to have to name names and we're going to have to give credit where it's due. What our state leaders from Georgia and Michigan to Florida and Arizona and the states in between did was not merely raise the bar or the standards of program and leadership. What they actually did was show us a new way. They gave us a gift, a new understanding of what was needed to win, and they proved that they could do it on their own terms. There are clear lessons and action items in their brilliance in that new understanding. The first is that we will only win by following the lead of groups on the ground. No more national plans created in DC or New York that are transplanted onto states. State leaders have the best sense of their state, better than experts and strategists who've only ever flown over their states. Funders, stakeholders, powers that be, we cannot continue to be gatekeepers or to stop the momentum. The states have recognized their power and they're prepared to win with or without us.
Yeah. And as you know, Becca, because you're engaged in BISC's alignment work, folks are already making these plans, right? What we've seen from 2020 is when we combine bold policies that really matter to Black, Indigenous, Latinx, AAPI, and other historically marginalized communities, and pair that with the 360 investment of centering and organizing directly impacted people, we win and we build sustainable power. And the state leaders know that, and that's what they're doing. So we've been working with folks on a 10-year plan to move some of the boldest policies and bring in those investments. And folks have already laid out priorities for 2022, 2024, and 2026. So there are ample opportunities for everybody at this conference to get engaged, to support that work, and be part of that success.
I mean, our state leaders are strategic, and they have a clear vision for their work and their states. Another lesson learned is that we need to treat these leaders as the leaders that they are. They are experts, they are decision makers, they know their communities, and they have a track record of success. But I'm not convinced that we collectively believe that yet. We rarely pay them for their expertise. Instead, we fly in outside consultants to extract information, or we bring state leaders to panels for funders and stakeholders in a grotesque dog and pony show that often doesn't yield resources for their work. We expect them to perform on our timelines and our schedules, to attend our meetings, but don't accommodate for their needs or priorities. If we want to win truly and for the long term, then we have to treat state leaders as experts, as partners in this work. And we have to compensate them for their expertise and allow them to make decisions over their work.
Yeah. And, you mentioned the timelines and schedules, and that also makes me think about the ways that moving to remote work has also allowed people to engage in more meaningful ways. So no longer are decision makers based on who can be at a meeting in the middle of the day in the largest city in the state. But by moving to Zoom and other remote platforms, we can hold meetings and work on projects and, with people all across the state geography, and shift timelines around the schedules that fit the needs of the individuals and the needs of their families.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing as we think about the states is how are we invested in these groups and these leaders for the long haul? We are still collectively easily tempted by shiny object syndrome, where we move from one shiny object, one battleground, one favorite state to the next. And we have a pattern of rash decision making that doesn't account for the impact on state ecosystems when we behave this way. Each investment in a state has an impact, and we have to examine those. Are we building capacity, or are we simply creating a mess in an ecosystem? What are we leaving behind, and what happens when we decide to move on? We have to consider what deep, long-term investment could look like for our work, for our organizations and leaders, and most importantly, for our communities.
Yeah, and we have lots of examples of that from Arizona, Colorado, Florida. But going bold takes time. And organizations are there in these states doing this work 365 days a year. And that's why we need to be thinking about ballot measures on this 360 life cycle, right? From incubation all the way through implementation. And that thought process also helps us continue to build from one effort to the next.
I think the 360 life cycle is really the future of our work. As we talk about true year-round resourcing, we have to be both strategic and thinking about opportunities for synergy, but also to be very ambitious. We need to be thinking about opportunities in places like Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, which are building on their existing infrastructure in moments like this. What are the places that we've been ignoring where great work is happening, and with deeper investment, even more could happen? We have to remove the limits of our thinking and dream big, because our states are.
Yeah. Again, tons of examples here, right? We could think about Arizona and Missouri and Oregon and Colorado, where we've been making those investments over the last 5, 10 plus years. And those investments are coming to fruition. And now we have a model of how to do that in other states. places like Oklahoma, Arkansas, Alaska. You've already mentioned Mississippi. And there's already just so many brilliant leaders in ballot measure states who have been and continue to do the work and who need our support. Not just financial support, but also, capacity building and skills building. But then also we need to think about, protecting this tool as itself, right? Ballot measures have been under attack as we have become more successful. I mean, already this year, we've tracked 119 bills to change the ballot measure process in 27 states. Things that are going to make this process more challenging by, putting in technicalities and hurdles that could make this process more expensive, more complicated, and really only accessible to a few. So we have to start there too, is we have to make sure that this tool is still available to these grassroots leaders who are doing this amazing work.
They're doing amazing work, and they've given us a blueprint, right? They've told us these are the steps to winning. Follow the lead of groups on the ground, compensate state leaders for their expertise and allow them to make decisions over their work, invest in states for the long haul, no more shiny object syndrome. And as we look at 2022 and beyond being a key piece of that, we have to be both strategic and ambitious. If we follow this blueprint as it's been laid out by our state leaders, we will build and we will win.
Yep. I couldn't have said it better myself. So thank you, Becca, for your time, for this conversation. And now I'm very, very excited to turn it over to some of these resilient and brilliant leaders out of Nebraska.
I'm Brad Christian Salas. I'm a organizer and strategist with End Slavery in Nebraska, and also voting rights field director for Civic Nebraska. Melina, Aubrey, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I am Melina Cohen. Had the honor of working as the campaign manager for End Slavery in Nebraska this last cycle. And I also am the communications director for Stand for Schools.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aubrey Mancuso. I'm the executive director at Voices for Children, and we helped lead the executive committee for the campaign to cap payday loans at 36% in Nebraska.
So yeah, today we're talking about Nebraska and what it was like dealing with the pandemic, and also dealing with the other pandemic of racism, and the type of investment we need here in the state to be able to do the work that needs to be done. I know for myself, as voting rights field director for Civic Nebraska, I ran a GOTV program, an election protection program, and that was for the day job, along with like our different legislative policies. And then me and Melina also co-founded End Slavery in Nebraska. And that actually came from BISC. I was at a conference and someone asked, hey, what's going on with Amendment 1 in Nebraska? What organizing work is being done to make sure it passes? And I said, I have no idea. And then when I got back to Omaha, I started asking around, and there wasn't anything happening. So I reached out to some people, and me and Melina ended up teaming up to work on that. And that was towards the beginning of the year, and then the rest of the year happened. So we got hit with the pandemic here in Omaha, Nebraska. We were obviously, like everywhere else in the country, grappling with the murder of George Floyd. But then shortly after that, we had a young Black man killed here. His name was James Scurlock. He was killed by a white supremacist. And so all these things are happening while we're trying to work on an initiative. I also saw another initiative, our initiative for independent redistricting, not be able to get off the ground because of COVID. So it's been a huge just time of changes when it comes to initiatives in Nebraska. But what we do know is initiatives is how we get things done in Nebraska. It is where we see change. A lot of times people don't think of Nebraska as a state with really super cool policies. And a lot of times we aren't, but when we do have those policies, it is because of ballot initiatives. And one of those super cool policies that recently happened was payday lending. So Aubrey, I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, so the payday lending initiative to cap rates on these loans at 36% actually passed with the support of 82% of voters in Nebraska. So those are pretty high numbers. And what we found ironic was that 82% of voters supported something that we couldn't get 50% of their elected representatives to support at the legislature. So prior to the ballot campaign, there was a group that worked really for over a decade to try and reform payday loans at the legislature. And in our last attempt, we really went all in at the legislature. We hired a fancy paid lobbyist. We did extensive work on training borrowers on storytelling and talking to the media, and ensured that they had the resources and support that they needed to be a part of that campaign as well. And we still couldn't get it done legislatively. So this was one of those issues that really the ballot was the only path forward. And at the end of the day, the people were far ahead of where their elected representatives were on this issue. And Melina, I know that you all had, we ended up eventually having some resources to support the campaign, but I know that you all did the whole campaign without really a lot in the way of paid resources.
Yeah, that's true. Ours was an entirely volunteer effort. Brad and I never earned anything for the work that we did on this, unfortunately. However, we did, just in the nick of time, receive some much needed support from the ACLU of Nebraska. And that was a connection that we made through, some coalition building and some help we were receiving from other states. Frankly, Colorado was actually the first state to get rid of slavery in their state constitution. And I got in touch with those organizers, and actually out of that, we've now founded a national nonprofit called the Abolish Slavery National Network that's working to pass similar amendments in state after state, which is another example of these ballot initiatives really leading the way in otherwise pretty red states. And yeah, so the ACLU came in and kind of saved the day. We were able, with their financial support, to purchase some radio advertising, which is pretty effective in Nebraska. I think if you look at our results county by county, you can see literally where we purchased that ad space. And other than that, because of COVID, we relied really heavily on, a digital campaign through social media and traditional media, me just talking to whomever I could about this. So yeah, that's how we did it.
Yeah, definitely. It was a really interesting campaign to just really run the majority of it off of word of mouth, and doing a lot of live to streaming videos like this, just letting people know that it was going to be on the ballot. I felt like that was a big thing. It's just people needed to know that they were going to have the chance to vote to remove slavery from our state constitution. And that's the thing to me, why I'm here, what I want to talk about is that investment coming into Nebraska, because I will always fight to remove slavery from any constitution for free. I will always fight for a lot of things and do them for free because it's the way I was raised and I believe in those things. But in Nebraska, we do need investment, and that investment goes a long way. I think if you talk to any organizer here in Nebraska, they're probably in a similar spot as me, where you think about what their year was like in 2020, and it was them working on almost every major issue because there's not enough of us. There's not enough funding here in Nebraska for there to be enough organizers and to really see the change that we could see happening here in Nebraska, especially through ballot initiatives, because there are a lot of things where the people of Nebraska are just so ready for it to happen, but our politicians aren't at that point. So that would be my ask to anyone who's watching this is if you have resources, if you have an investment you can make it in Nebraska, because the cost to what you get is just so great here. We got a great bang for your buck. So definitely, if you want to make a difference, make it in Nebraska.
And as a C3 organization, our organization didn't have any dedicated resources to really work on this issue. So, it was really a labor of love on something that we believed in for me and my staff and our time that we dedicated to that. And especially up front in kind of our ballot initiatives. I know that the one that Brad and Melina worked on actually went through the legislature, but we actually gathered signatures to get the payday lending ballot initiative put on the ballot. And because of our laws in Nebraska, that can be a very extensive and difficult time and resource intensive process. So that investment that's required up front before you sometimes even have the chance to form a group to raise money to do this type of work is pretty extensive. So that's but it's possible to win. So I think just hoping for that.
Yeah, I would just echo what you've both said, especially Brad, about, we will do this work because it's the right thing to do. But I think it's also right that organizers be compensated for their, talent, local knowledge, our efforts and our dedication. It takes skill and knowledge to pull something like this off. And I think that we can't continue to count on people to step up and volunteer. I mean, like you said, we saw one effort fail because they couldn't get it off the ground. So investment is much needed. And like you said, we have a lot of bang for your buck here. We had a shoestring budget thanks to the ACLU, but look what we achieved with that much. So.
Definitely, we were able to achieve a lot with a little. And I mean, look at just what we have here today. We removed slavery from our Constitution and made a huge difference with payday loans. Those are two huge accomplishments that we got done here in Nebraska. I'm very proud of those accomplishments and to know both of y'all. And this next live video that you'll see will be just talking about the brilliance and resilience of leaders on these ballot initiatives that make such a huge difference in people's lives, and how they kind of did their work in 2020. And I know Melina's going to be on there, and she was an amazing partner throughout the work we did to pass Amendment 1. So I'm happy to pass y'all over to them. But thank y'all for joining me. I really enjoyed this conversation. And everyone watching this, invest your dollars in Nebraska, send resources. We need to give people what they want in Nebraska because the people want it. Help us not rely on our politicians. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mila Alayubi. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Strategic Partnerships Director for BISC. And right now, we're going to meet 3 movement leaders who showed exceptional resilience and brilliance in their ability to adapt and innovate during their respective 2020 campaigns. So Melina, Ashley, and Katrina, during our discussion, I ask that you limit your answers to 1 to 2 minutes as I rotate between the 3 of you. And to the audience, I encourage you to add your questions to the Q&A throughout this conversation, and our panelists will answer as many as we can at the end. So let's begin. Could each of you please tell us a little bit about yourselves and your campaigns and where each of you drew your resilience from during the campaign to keep you going? I'll start with Ashley.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm Ashley Pinelli. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the Associate State Director at 9 to 5 Colorado. We are an economic justice organization for working women. And I worked on the Prop 118 ballot for paid family and medical leave in Colorado. And, you know, a big source of strength and resiliency was just having the right partners and allies and community to work on the issue with. There were so many times where we were just challenged and undermined throughout this campaign, especially as women of color leading on paid family and medical leave in the state. And there were a lot of times we were asked to compromise on our values for the sake of just getting something passed. And that sounded nice sometimes, but really just regrounding in the values and just getting advice from my community about, you know, how to move forward and how to stay strong was a big source of resiliency and helped me stay grounded.
Thank you so much. Katrina, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Katrina L. Rogers. I'm the principal of Colorado Media, and I was the campaign manager for Louisiana for Personal Freedoms. My pronouns are she, her, hers. For me, with everything that I do, my resiliency campaign was about abortion, but I named every single day that my fight wasn't just limited to abortion, but it was about the people of Louisiana and fighting for us to have access to the things that we need to survive, not only survive, but be well and thrive. And I carry that commitment and my commitment to the people who are pushed farthest to the margins and everything that I do. And that was a very, very important part of the work that I carried with the campaign.
Thank you so much. Melina, your turn.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melina Cohen, pronouns she, her. So I helped this last election lead the effort to abolish slavery from Nebraska's constitution, which was successful. And then my day job is I'm a communications director with Stand for Schools, which is a small nonprofit here in Nebraska.
So this question is for all of you. What were some of the challenges that you faced because of the multiple crises going on in your states and around the country? And how did you adapt and innovate? Starting with Ashley again.
Yeah, you know, I think that we've been working on paid leave in Colorado for years and years now. And for many years, it was a legislative effort. And that was a really difficult environment to try to navigate this type of policy. We spent a lot of years being shut down. The women of color leaders in those spaces were constantly just not listened to about what our communities needed, and told we were asking for too much and told we were taking up too much space, and just the same story over and over, just really gaslit and undermined throughout this entire process for so many years. And it came to a point where we had to make some pretty serious decisions about how we wanted to move forward in the legislature, and a really problematic program idea came to the forefront that would have really just threatened the movement for paid leave across the nation and just created a really problematic, inequitable policy at the state level. So we had to push really hard to pull the plug on that legislative effort to defeat a really bad and dangerous bill. And honestly, the innovation was running a ballot, which people really underestimated us in the state, told us it would never pass, that Colorado voters weren't ready for this, and that we would be setting the movement back by another decade if we dare run a ballot, and it failed. And we just really had to trust our instinct that workers and voters, this is a really common sense policy to folks, and that the people who are actually impacted by this issue want to see it passed. And bringing it to the ballot in itself, building a campaign in a really short amount of time, what was kind of our innovation and the risk we took. And I'm really happy it paid off.
Thank you for that. Katrina, what about you?
Wow. So many things. I'm going to name the largest obstacle that we had to deal with was white supremacy in our everyday lives and in the background of what was going on in the world. That's always happening. But the uprisings were a backdrop. Obviously, the pandemic, we had 6 hurricanes come to Louisiana that were scheduled to come specifically to New Orleans where I lived. One of them did come, but we had 2 that hit other parts of southern Louisiana. So we had all of these crises going on at the same time that overlapped, and it goes back to resiliency. Like, I guess it wasn't really innovative. It was like resiliency and knowing that the people who were impacted by the other things that were going on were also the people that we centered in the campaign, and that we could not afford to stop fighting because they needed us more than ever. And so we just kind of went with it early on when we realized that the pandemic was a thing and people were going to quarantine, and door knocking may not be the safest approach, especially early on, because Louisiana was a state that was heavily hit. Early last spring, we switched to doing a lot of digital outreach as much as possible and having conversations and doing research specifically about what kind of conversations we could have with people on the phones, making sure that we're making contact with as many people and having conversations about what's going on. So we just responded to everything in real time. And, the biggest things were not directly with the campaign, but what was happening outside of it that impacted not only the campaign, but also staff, because people who work on campaigns are people and they have lives and they have families and other issues and concerns aside from just working on the campaign.
So true. All right, Melina, how about you?
Well, yeah, because of COVID, we couldn't safely use a lot of those traditional campaign tactics and tools like canvassing. So we also relied pretty heavily on digital campaigning, social media, traditional media. Our other big issue in Nebraska was capacity. We were an entirely volunteer effort, so I didn't get paid for this work. My partner, Brad Christian Salas, also did not get paid for this effort. And at the same time, we, like everywhere else in the nation, were watching these protests unfold in response to George Floyd's murder. And in Omaha, during one of those protests, a young Black man, James Scurlock, was killed by a white supremacist. And that obviously resulted in a lot of, righteous unrest, even more so here in Omaha. And that pulled away Brad. He did some excellent work organizing the community around, Black Lives Matter. And also, the senator who actually got this amendment through our legislature, Senator Justin Wayne, ended up representing the family of James Scurlock. So my team, sometime last summer, kind of became then a team of one, because there was just so much going on in our community. And at the same time, we just had a lack of funding, I think, here and resources. And I realize I didn't answer this the first time, so I will now. But even despite all of these challenges, I drew a lot of strength from every single person who was out in the street protesting. Everybody who I know is incarcerated right now, and also from the help that we received from organizers in other states, like Colorado in particular, which became the first state to abolish slavery from their constitution.
And to all three of you, if you could give one piece of advice to future funders, stakeholders, and other advocates based on your experience, what would that be? Giving that one to you, Katrina.
I've spent a lot of time trying to convince funders that investing in a campaign in Louisiana was not a waste of money. I am always advocating for the South, and you've heard me have those conversations. It is really important that there is real investment in the South, and that you don't look at us and say, well, we can't do this, we can't do that, because there's no infrastructure if you're not investing in us. I have so many friends who were involved in what was going on in Georgia, and really proud of them. Also very angry because I have been telling people for a long time that we can win in the South. And my hope is that people will take us seriously, and that they won't look at what's going on and people are being marginalized, and that there's so much oppression and suffering here, and look at it as an opportunity. If you truly are trying to make things better, then you really need to invest in the spaces where people are harmed the most by systems and the government. And that's the biggest thing, is that you just don't be superficial when you're looking at what's going on. I had to have a lot of conversations explaining that, yes, you look at the state legislature of Louisiana as red, but also there's a story behind that. And it has to do with funding and term limits and all of these other things that you won't know unless you're invested and involved and care enough to have those robust conversations. So really, please do the work, do due diligence, have conversations with people who are doing the work, because we've been doing the work without money. So imagine what we can accomplish if you actually truly did invest and implement change. It is your responsibility to invest and do the hard work, and not just support the places where you think you can win.
And for your initiative, did you win? And what do you believe the initiative accomplished?
We did not win. Our fight was to defeat a ballot measure from going to the Constitution to say that abortion is not a right. We did not win that. But my goal was always to touch people across the state and help fortify the statewide coalitions that we could get to a point where we could really have relationships across the state and push for the things that we need. So I was also talking about how unemployment, the most you can get in Louisiana is $207 a year. There's Cancer Alley, where petro plants are killing people, and we have lead in our water, and all of these other things that are connected to, again, people suffering. So in that regard, we didn't defeat the amendment, but we did really establish a lot of relationships, and the work continues, and people are very excited, especially in places outside of New Orleans, where people are typically ignored and overlooked and not considered. And it was really important for me to make sure that we were running a statewide campaign that considered every one of the 64 parishes in Louisiana.
I love it. That's phenomenal. Ashley, for you, what advice would you give?
Well, I echo everything Katrina said, and just to build on it a little, where to begin? I would say that we have to be focused on values and equity. Supporting a campaign in itself is not enough. Supporting how we win campaigns, how we have transformative real change for our communities, that is equally and more important than getting wins. And I think that it's just really important to be investing in the leaders on the ground who are upholding the values, upholding equity, who are closest to the most directly impacted folks on the ground. And just listening to the needs, just listen to women of color. We're laying out very clearly what is needed. And we just need folks investing in that work and really trying to build transformative relationships with each other and build deep trust with funders, with other stakeholders in coalition. I would say that relationship building and sticking to the values and being united on these fronts will get us a long way. And I just see sometimes a lot of maybe disagreement within the progressive community about what the approach is. And we don't have that type of time to waste. We just have to be in agreement that the approach needs to be to uphold the strongest values that will create transformational change for our communities. And that is what we should be united about. We have enough opposition to deal with that we should feel pretty solid in how we work together.
Now, because we are running out of time, I actually want to throw in a couple of questions for everyone, Melina. But we can come back if we have some more time for your advice as well. First question being, how helpful was social media in the campaign? And also, because this is all relating to COVID-19 impacts on voter contact and tactics, how much did COVID limit door-to-door voter contact, which you did touch on? And how do you think it impacted the outcome of your campaigns? So both social media and the door-to-door contact. Anyone who wants to jump in, this is for y'all.
I have an answer, but I can wait if someone else wants to say something.
Go ahead, Katrina.
Okay.
Yes.
So for context, I didn't get banned until September. So we had to rely very heavily on social media because I didn't have a way to contact voters. And so blame the pandemic, but also I just didn't have access to contact voters in the state of Louisiana. We didn't have money for it for a really long time. And no one who had access to it would give the campaign access to ban in Louisiana. So in addition to like figuring out how to get money to actually get Van and call people, a lack of resources was really important. I think, yes, the pandemic was an issue and all of these other things too, but I really just want to name specifically how a lack of resources, even when they were available to be shared with us, were not given to us. And I just want to explicitly name that.
Truth. Ashley or Melina, any other thoughts on the impacts?
Yeah, in this virtual world, we relied so heavily on social media. We did a dozen different live streams because we couldn't have in-person events. We relied heavily on social media toolkits. We didn't do any in-person door knocking. We also set up our van system at about at the end of August, and it was just really a learning curve for us to try to get that set up. But we did rely really heavily on our text and phone banking programs, and they worked really well. I would say that signature collection was really difficult in a pandemic, and we invested quite a bit of resources into signature collection alone to even qualify for the ballot with the social distance protocols. So it definitely added an extra challenge, but also in hindsight, now we have some of the tools and resources that we need to do this virtually in a way we've never done before this.
Fantastic.
I would just quickly say, yeah, we actually never had van access. We did no in-person voter contact. We actually didn't do any direct voter contact. We relied very heavily on social media and traditional media. We spent almost our entire budget on radio advertising, which we can see from the election results had a direct impact on our victory here.
Fantastic. And it just really lifts up the idea that organizations and campaigns who have privilege, van is a privilege, right? And we really have to address these dynamics and make these tools more accessible for folks who need them across our ecosystem. So that's fantastic that you all lifted that up. And it's amazing what you were able to accomplish without it or with only very little.
Each and every one of you, we are so grateful for all of you. And I just want to share a very quick fun fact. Today's attendees collectively represent 548 different organizations. That's like incredible.
Wow, that is incredible. There's so much amazing programming. So let's just get back into it. So this afternoon, we're going to talk about campaign tactics, and we're going to talk about research and data, and we're going to get to see a really beautiful performance and learn how people are showing up incredibly hard today. I mean, in this incredibly hard season. It's actually been a long year. And I actually got a question for Chris. I want to know, have you got your Fauci ouchie yet?
I got it. I got my first one, and I'm supposed to get my next one tomorrow, but I can't do it because the road ahead. I'm getting my second one on Saturday. So
okay, but the thing is, you got a plan, like you had a plan to vote in the fall.
That's right.
That's plan right. To get your vaccine. I also got my Fauci ouchie about a month ago. So I'm just so excited. Like, you know, I just want to be on a beach, you know, be able to go back out. I want to be able to go back to Road Ahead in Vegas. So I was like, you know, I just gotta get the shot, you know, keep the curve down, make sure that we do good. I'm gonna do what I need to do.
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel so blessed and so privileged to even like have it, and that is like something that has not been accessible, right, to like so many people, right? But like, I am like totally dreaming about. I was laughing when people were posting in the app about karaoke, and if those of you who weren't there last year, we had a bad ass party because like intuitively I knew we were gonna need to like have a great party because 2020 already in February had been a really hard year without, you know, the pandemic and the uprising. We just, you know, and people were having fun, right? And they were singing karaoke, and you know, I like to sing. And one of the things that I have really been singing the last couple days is like, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away.
You should have told me we was going to go to church. I would have brought my tambourine. No, but you know what? It's okay because we're on Zoom. So what I'll say is that actually, you know, we have to get back to the regularly scheduled programming. So next up, we have a foundational video that Mila was talking about to better understand the journey of ballot measures from when they were created over 120 years ago. And so, I think I got a little bit of a no. We need to make sure that if you're watching us right now, or if you can't hear us right now, you need to go back on the left-hand corner and you need to click the links in the agenda and go into that session. So, you know, we made it real easy for you. You don't have to walk nowhere. You can keep your pajama pants on. You just got to click that button over there, agenda, and go right into the session. And so we're going to show that foundational video right now.
Thank you.